Kid, we're talking about being transparent. We're talking about being open and being vulnerable, that you're not hiding, but that we are able to know the real you for who you are. And then the other part is that it says, and he felt no shame. One of the things that is so tragic to me in our world today is that when somebody starts to be open and they get these weird responses, it creates shame instead of acceptance and vulnerability. And so we're going to talk a little bit about both of those, if that's okay with you. I do want to say that one of the things that is very important, and again, I'm going to talk from the context of having a Christian marriage. I hope that will be okay with you. You know, I grew up in a home that the marriage was not good. My mom and my dad, drank pretty heavily, and so most of our weekends were filled with them yelling and screaming at each other. And ultimately, as I've said before, sometimes it would get into a dish throwing contest, and some of my Saturday mornings were sweeping up broken glass. And but that taught me. I said, there has to be a better answer than living like this. And that started me on my journey to find God. It's funny what God uses to get you to look for Him. But it took that, because when I looked at their lives and I looked at the lives of the people around them, I had a pretty hopeless view. And I said, there's got to be something better than that. And so thus I started my journey. My wife, she grew up in a family where her dad and her mom stayed together until his death, but their family was filled with a lot of yelling and screaming, and it wasn't a safe place. And so both of us had our own baggage coming into our marriage, and we figured out we got to do some things that are going to be different from how we were raised, and we've got to make a difference. And hopefully some of these things that I share with you will work. I do want to be able to say at the very beginning that there's no such thing as a perfect marriage. Hear me. I see young couples get married and they have these high expectations of each other, and some of them are okay in the very beginning, but sooner or later you got to realize there's only one perfect guy in the world, and they crucified him. And you're not it, and your spouse is not it. And to me, where I have been able to land on a lot of this stuff is that we both come into a marriage with different strengths and different weaknesses. And the more that we can work together and use those strengths and those weaknesses to make a whole, the better off we're going to be. But I do believe that a life with God and a life even in marriage, if we're going to learn to live by faith, we have to learn to trust. You hear me? For so many of us, we think belief or faith is believism. Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. I believe that statement. But faith is way more than that. Right. Faith is, I believe that statement, and I'm going to trust my life with Him and His teachings, and I will put into practice what He says, even though I don't have any idea what's going on. I'm going to trust His word over trusting me and my emotions. And that's where we begin. But also, too, when you come into the marriage relationship, it's also a journey in trust. You're trying to learn how to be one with each other, but you're also learning that you've got to be able to trust. And some of us come from some very jacked up backgrounds. And I recognize that. I recognize even with the idea of saying trust, that some of us said, man, when you trust, you get hurt. And so we've got to be able to educate our consciences and educate our hearts to do that. So let's kind of, I'm going to kind of go through this. Some of it's going to be more like just talking. So indulge me as a rambling old fella, and let's do some talking. The passage that we looked at in verse 24, it says that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. The first thing that I just simply want to state, and that is, in order for a marriage to work, you got to leave your family and cleave to your spouse. Most marriages, when they're still connected to the parent, and the parent can still have say-so in what goes on in the marriage, it's not a good recipe. And so they have to leave and cleave. And some parents don't want their kids to leave. But some kids don't want to leave because they would rather mom and dad take care of it than them learning how to live together. So I just want to say that, you got to leave and cleave. The second thing that I want to get out of this, he says, this is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. When you're united to your spouse, you make a commitment. To me, a vow is a vow. Our world makes relationships disposable. And our words don't really have any value. We don't mean what we say, and particularly as you get involved in so much marriage counseling with people, you almost think that people get up there at a wedding and say, I vow or I promise this as long as I get what I want. Or I promise that I will do this as long as you treat me the way I think I need to be treated. And so there's almost like a clause that gives you an out. But I want to tell you, if you're going to do it God's way, the way that I understand it is that when I made a commitment to my spouse, that was until I died. There was no out. And where I'm going with all of this is oftentimes a lot of us don't want to work through stuff because we have an out. And when things get tough, and they will get tough, when things get tough, you're not sitting there going, well, I'm going to pack my bags and get out of here. You go, no, I have no place to go but forward, so we got to sit down and figure this one out. And I want to say that because to me, I believe that when you make a vow, you make a vow to God, and you're making a vow to that other person. And there are times when we've gone through some stuff, and I'll look at my spouse and I'll say, listen, I made a vow to you, and I fully plan to keep it. And so as we go through this marriage thing, I think one of the things that gives security and a bedrock and a place to trust is to know that we've both made vows to each other regardless. Am I making sense? Okay. I don't want to lose you here, but I have seen that. My dad got married and divorced 3 different times. And I thought, how sad that is. How sad that is. And honestly, for me, I love my spouse more than I've ever loved her. And I'm glad that I had smart enough sense to stick around to get to this place. Because there's things about my spouse that I love that I didn't even know were there years ago. But now here we are. All right, so then he goes here, it says, this is the man, he leaves his father and mother and he's united to the wife and they will become one. That's the challenge. Is learning to be one. What's so amazing to me about Christian marriages is you got 2 sinful people who've been forgiven, who are trying to come together and be one. And that takes a lot of work. That doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen because you listen to love songs all the time. It takes work. But in order for you to be one, there's a couple things I believe that we've got to learn. One is that we need to learn what love is. My belief is that most people don't, except for godly people. We have to learn to love God's kind of way. And, the world teaches us that love is fickle, love is conditional, and love is feeling driven. And God's kind of love is nothing like that. God's kind of love says, I can seek your highest good right now, even if I don't feel like it. I can love you when you don't love me. And that's the choice that I make. And that's one of the things that I love so much about being a Christian, is this taught me how to love past the way that I used to love. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But to me, the big deal about learning to be one is learning how to communicate with each other. As we've said before, you can you can tie two cats together with a roll of tape. That don't make them one. You know, same thing for married couples, you know. The image worked, didn't it? Okay. But we've got to learn how to communicate to promote oneness. And my brain is going on a tangent right now, and I've got to bring it back here. I'm having that senior moment here. But part of learning how to be a good communicator, as I lose my thoughts and go all over the place, is we've got to learn to be a good listener. You know, one of the things that terrifies me about our culture today is that nobody really takes the effort to listen to anybody. And it's so sad to me. I mean, the politics are jacked up because neither side can listen to each other. They say things to each other. I look at people using email, and they will get at night behind a computer and start typing things to somebody, and boom, sends it out, and they haven't had any eyeball contact with them. And if it's critical, that person gets to wake up in the morning to that email, and next thing you know, there's discord because they didn't learn how to communicate. Right. The same thing is true with texting. You know, I don't know, I can't remember all the different acronyms that are there. But I've seen people not even know how to have a conversation, but they will master the art of texting all the time. And so they don't know how to communicate. You know, Jesus says, though seeing, they do not see, though hearing, they do not hear or understand. Wow. And he said that about his culture and that place and time, and I think we've only gotten worse. Wow. You know, Jesus also taught in another passage, he says, therefore consider carefully how you will listen. And, James, which is a great passage in James 1, he says, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Amen. Man, our world needs that right now. It needs that. Oftentimes we come out of the world doing the very opposite. We're, quick to speak, slow to listen, and we stay angry all the time. But I want you to think for yourself as you talk about this whole idea of becoming one, are you a good listener? Have you worked at that? I think that listening takes learning to do that. I'm going to just give you some things that I've given. What makes a good listener? Y'all with me on this? Going to indulge me? Okay. First of all, I think when you become a good listener, you got to make eye contact. You look that person in the eye. You're not sitting there doing this, over there. You learn, if you're going to become a good listener, you got to sit there and eyeball to eyeball. I think when we are going to be a good listener, we need to learn to listen without interrupting. What I've seen so many times is somebody will start talking and the other person, boom, jump right in and try to take the conversation away. And then that other person just shuts down and says, well, I'm not even going to try. But learning how to communicate or learn how to listen without interrupting. I've often said it's so important to learn to act, not react. And this is true for obviously in marriage, but it's also true in parenting, and it's true in discipleship. But we've got to learn to be good listeners. One of the things that I have felt that is really useful, and here I'll replay it, and that is recite what you just heard. When my wife and I are sitting down and she's saying something, it's easier for me to go, yeah, I hear, yeah. And I've only heard half of it. And so I've learned, and both of us have learned over the years, that when we're sitting down looking eyeball to eyeball with each other, here's what I just heard you say. I heard, and as I've said before, I heard A, I heard B, and I heard C. Is that what I'm supposed to hear? And she goes, well, you forgot the D. I went, whoa. So I hear the D. Is that what I'm supposed to hear? Normally it'll go, yeah. And oftentimes, even in marriage and debates between spouses, if we're just felt heard, it's more than half of the battle. But recite it back. And then one of the things that I've learned is to be able to say, now my wife talks a whole lot more than I do. I've often said, all I wanted is a sip from the fire hydrant. I didn't want the whole fire hydrant. Y'all laugh, but y'all know my wife and you know what I'm talking about. It used to be that when she was making her appeal to me, she would do it from 3 angles. She'd start over here. Wah, 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 wah. Then she'd come over here. Well, maybe you did. Ah, bah, 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 bah. And then she'd go to the third one. No, really. Bah, bah, bah. And I've learned to say, you don't need to triplicate or do it triple. I heard it the first time. But one of the things that I feel like if we're going to be good listeners is to be able to respond by saying, I heard you. This is what I heard you say. What do you want me to do with that? Because sometimes we have agendas when we're sharing. What do you want me to do with that? The other one that I think is very useful, particularly if we're learning how not to react to each other, is to say, do you want me just to listen or do you want me to respond? And, oftentimes all we need is an ear. I just need for you to listen. All ears. Let's go. But you've got to have your spouse or whoever needs to know that you are sincerely want to listen to what they have to say. And that takes effort, that takes energy. That's not a car ride. That's not, a text message. It's sitting down looking face to face. I also think that if you're going to be a good listener, you have to have a time frame. One of the things that I believe needs to happen, and that is that we need to settle matters quickly. With couples who stew on stuff for weeks or months, that's toxic. It'll only destroy you, and it'll cause you to drift apart versus growing closer together. I was thinking about a passage where Paul, we used to say this in marriage classes, and I haven't heard it much lately, and that is, in your anger, don't sin, and we go, amen. It says, do not let the sun go down while you're still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. So when we're working through stuff, you got a 24-hour period. I got to settle matters quickly. I got to get something done here. Versus, I'll talk about it in 3 weeks. No. If you're going to be a good listener, also have the click talking in your head saying, whatever I said is what I meant. Y'all just need to be good listeners, huh? No. But it is amazing to me how little effort a lot of people put into being good listeners. I've been in the ministry for a long time, and one of the things when we sit in counseling appointments, which I used to find pretty amazing, is I would sit there and listen to the person and ask questions about what they just said, ask the stuff, do you want me to just listen? Do you want me to respond? What would you like me to do with what you just shared with me? And they'll go things, I don't want you to do anything. It was so awesome talking with you. This was really helpful for me. And I'm sitting there going, I didn't say anything. I'm just sitting and listening. But we've got to learn how to be great listeners to each other. And I think particularly with spouses, when we're dating, we always want to listen about everything. And once we get married, it's like, what is your deal? And I used to use the joke years ago about this wife, the husband had been married a long time. He says, honey, you don't tell me you love me like you used to. And he puts the paper down and he goes, I told you I loved you the day I married you. If I change my mind, I'll let you know. Got to be a little better than that, right? The second part of communications is being a good talker. That doesn't mean you have to use a lot of words, but it does mean you need to use words. It is fascinating to me, particularly when you're in the world and you're listening to people talk. They use profanity all the time. Going, can you even say a word without using the F word? You know? And I also respond listening to people talk. I said, boy, their vocabulary is pretty shallow. You know, but when we learn to be good talkers, we got to learn how to communicate, learn how to use words. To be a good talker, you got to have eye contact. Y'all with me on this? Good. I need for you to look me in the eyes. When you have kids and you're teaching them how to communicate, you got to get down on your knees. I need you to look me in the eye, because they're, you know. But you want to have good contact with your eyes. I think it's so important to learn to communicate calmly. I grew up in a house where you didn't know if mom or dad were serious until it got to a certain pitch. And then you say, oh man, I better do something about this. And both my wife and I grew up in screaming households. And we just said, we got to do something different. Yes. And so we have to learn to communicate by communicating calmly. I've shared this before. You know, sometimes we don't know how to communicate the intensity of something unless we're screaming, or unless veins are kind of popping out in our foreheads, you know. But one of the things that was so helpful for me is to be able to use the scale of 1 to 10 when I'm communicating. When we're resolving an issue, you know, we may sit down and says, Keith, I need to talk to you about something. And I go, yeah, what's up? And she goes, well, this thing that's been going on between us is really irritating me. And she might be able to say something like, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is 11 right now. And I will stop the world and go, what? She's serious about this. And she did that without screaming and without yelling. But I know in my heart, this is serious. We got to do something about this. Years ago, when they used to have checkbooks, I remember Colin trying to write a missions check. He said, I don't even know how to write a check. That big check you had right up there, you know. But we used to have these checkbooks you used to carry around with you. And one of the things that used to drive me nuts is my wife would write a check, didn't mark it in the registry. And I'd come home. So first of all, where's the check? Well, I can't find it. That's not the response I needed. Then I look in the registry. Where are these 2 checks? Oh, yeah, I did this. And so we'd have to sit down and say, can we talk about the checkbook? She goes, what? I said, when you don't write something in the registry, it puts me in a 15. Did you hear me? I'm not talking about 11. I'm talking about 15. And so we had to our solution to that was we got those 3-ring check binders, and you had to leave it on my desk and just initial when you took the check out. That was our solution to that particular problem. But we were able to communicate without screaming and without yelling at each other. And you know, when you're learning to be a good talker or learning to be a good communicator, you know, you say, am I making sense what I just said? And because sometimes, you know, we think we're just clear as it all can be, and we're not very clear. But I think it's helpful for us to be able to, are you catching my drift? You understand what I'm saying here? There are some things, though, that I've learned, too, about learning to be a good talker, and that is that sometimes we need to resolve something, but I'm not in a place to resolve it. I know none of you have ever been there, but there are people that aren't ready to sit down and talk. And I know my wife used to say, we need to talk. And that's like, we got to change that word, you know. Is there a good time we can talk? Sure, okay. But there are times, though, when I'm not in a good place, and I've got to be able to say something like, right now I am so angry that anything that comes out of my mouth will be so unrighteous, I have no need to say it. I said, I'll tell you what, give me 30 minutes. I'm going to go take a prayer walk, get my heart where it needs to be, and then we will sit down and resolve this matter. Is this okay with you? And she's learned to be able to say, yes, please. And I'm thankful for that, because I'm a sinful man. And I can prove it sometimes with some pretty hard things to say. But I found that is useful when we're learning how to communicate with each other. I know I'm rambling on here, but we've got to learn to be a good listener. We've got to learn to be a good talker, a communicator to those things, so that each person is feeling heard and listened to. The Bible tells us that when you and I become Christians, we come out of darkness into light. And so we have to learn how to live in the light. I used to live in the shade all the time, or probably in the dark a lot more. But when you become a Christian, you try to move away from that and start becoming people that love the light and want to live in the light. And so when we start talking about transparency and openness, that is a part of being a Christian, but it's also a part of marriage, is to learn how to be open with what's going on. I want to make sure I'm running out of my time. No, I respect. But I do want to say this. When it talks about they were naked and they felt no shame, one of the things that I absolutely treasure is the idea of providing a safe place for a person to communicate. That wasn't always true. When I first became a Christian and I started opening up about certain things, I'd get hammered. Why are you thinking that? Why did you do that? And I go, well, I learned a lesson here. I will just keep myself closed off and not share anything with you. And that, a bad response on my part, but it also was a bad response on the other person's part, because they weren't creating a space where I could work through stuff. And I really believe that it is so important with my spouse or with my kids or with other disciples, that when I'm with them, I want our time together to be a safe place. I want it to be where you can share whatever you feel you need to share, and you're not going to get judgment and condemnation from me. But you're learning to sit there and listen through that. I know that you might be able to say, wow, that's intense. Later on, they're going to come and take me away, so that's where they're coming. But learning how to create a safe place. I've learned that when my wife is sharing some things and it's hard for her to share them, I'll look at her and say, I just want you to know I'm so proud that you opened up about that. Amen. I want you to know that I'm here. Yesterday, we had to take her to the urgent care, and she looked at me and she goes, I just feel like I'm a burden. And I went, don't you dare. I said, this is just a part of us being together. And I said, but I love you. And I said yes to this a long time ago. But we're here. And she goes, that makes me feel so much better. And I'm like, cool. At least I was smart enough to say that, But I really believe that couples need to really figure out how to have a safe place where they can talk. So much of the world is judgmental. So much of the world is critical. So much of the world is communicating. You don't measure up. And once again, when you share that, it proves that. But where we need to be able to is to say, I can come before you, warts and all, and I'm still going to be accepted by you, and I'm still going to be loved by you. Doesn't mean that we don't say some things to help them, but it means that we've listened and we've provided a place where they are being open and honest. I believe the church needs to be a safe place. Oftentimes it's not. And where we can come in, just hanging onto our spiritual lives by our toenails, and then we start talking about it. We don't need somebody looking down on their holy nose at you, pointing a finger at you. And you say, man, brother, I didn't know you were hurting like this. What can I do to help you right now? But provide a safe place. Is that making sense? Okay. I'm going to finish up here in a minute. But I wanted to read something that my wife gave at our Valentine's last week. And I got smart. I went and got her a card. She got me a card. And I went and bought flowers. They haven't bowed their head in prayer yet, but they're still strong and going. But I treasure this. It says, Dearest Keith, through every season of our lives together, you have been my safe place and my best friend. You've given my heart a place to rest in trust. You're still the man I fell in love with, and I would say yes to you again, even though it's been 50 years. I thought that's. Our spouses need it, so do our kids. Our kids. This world is hard. They need safe places where they can talk. Our brothers and sisters in Christ need safe places so we can make sense out of this crazy, crazy world. I want to just close by simply saying that one of the things that I have, as a young Christian, you've got to learn to make God a safe place. The thing that I have treasured so much in the latter parts of my life is to be able to talk to God gut level honest. And when you go through the book of Psalms, you see David saying, man, he can get away with saying that. Yet I think sometimes God is not bothered by our honesty. There are times when I'll get up and pray, God, I don't even want to be a follower of you today. I just want to give in to my sinful nature and do exactly what I want to do. Now, I know that's not what I should be doing, but I need your help. Please help move my heart in that area. Or I've got an appointment with this person today, and that's the last person I want to see on the face of this earth. Please give me grace. Give me mercy. Help me to treat him as I want to be treated. And to be able to do that. But I love the fact that we can have a safe place in prayer with God. I think we have to have a safe place with our kids. We have to have a safe place with our spouse, and create a safe place with our brothers and sisters in Christ. I don't even know how to end all of this. I know I'm out of time. But God created marriage to be a safe place. To be a place where we can be transparent and unashamed. I believe that in order for us to have a great marriage, we've got to be good communicators. And, I'd like for you to think about, are you a good listener? Are you a good talker? Ask those questions to your spouse. I would also think it would be important to ask, if you're married, to ask, do you believe our marriage is a safe place? What can we do to make it that way? And to move on with that. I know I've talked on, but that's all I got to say. So,